I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're grateful to Geir Pedersen and Martin Griffith for their briefings. We also listened to Madam Al-Barouki very attentively. We highly value and support the mediation efforts of the Special Envoy on the political track. We welcome the completion of the 6th round of the Constitutional Committee in Geneva. Its work has not been easy. What's most important is that an effective political process has been resumed in accordance with the provisions of Resolution 2254 and the decisions of the Congress of Syrian National Dialogue in Sochi. What's very important is that the sides have finally been able to meet after a 9-month hiatus and to continue with the direct constructive dialogue. And I want to note the contribution of the states guarantors of the Astana process in ensuring this work. Unfortunately, at the height of the session of the committee, a terrorist attack occurred in Damascus, which cost the lives of 14 soldiers. We see that those who are not interested in seeing the committee successfully complete its work to be behind this attack. Now, in the upcoming phase, it's very important to ensure that the work of the Constitutional Committee remains led and implemented by the Syrians themselves without interference from outside or imposing artificial timeframes. There's no alternative to impartial work with the Syrian sides in order to help them find solutions. However, we need to be patient and pragmatic without excessive expectations for immediate results, especially when we're dealing with such a fundamental issue for any state as a constitution. We're convinced that the inter-Syrian dialogue should not become a hostage to technical modalities. We intend to continue to actively work with all interested parties in order to reach progress on the constitutional track. However, much will depend on your diplomatic skills, Geir. The UN Special Envoy must be in constant contact with the Syrians, try to resolve mutual mistrust and find mutually acceptable solutions and compromises. We hope to count on more active efforts on your part in working with all Syrian sides. Mr. President, in spite of the overall stabilization of the military and political situation in Syria, the risk of escalation of tensions remains, especially on territories not under government control in Idlib, the Euphrates area, and at Tanaf. We note with concern the reports on continuing illegal Israeli airstrikes against Syria. In the northeast of the country, ISIL terrorists are free to roam, using the absence of the legitimate authorities, and there we're seeing internecine armed clashes. In this connection, we'd like to once again stress the importance of assisting the inter-Syrian dialogue in order to restore the unity, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of Syria. Now we'd like to move on to the contents of the report of the Secretary General on the humanitarian situation in Syria for the period August-September of this year. We note significant difference compared to the previous reports as far as the statistics on authorizations issued to the UN for humanitarian operations. The number of regular programmatic movements with program or blanket approvals has increased by 7%. From the 218 requested approvals for missions requiring approval by MFA, Damascus has already approved 83%. 17% remain under consideration. So this is not a refusal. So it appears that almost all requests made by the UN were satisfied. It turns out that access to 97 of those in need in Syria is a problem in areas with lower or moderate levels of access constraints. The only serious obstacle for the movement of humanitarian workers are mines and unexploded ordnance. But even this did not prevent the UN to increase its presence on the ground in the northeast of the country. Of course, there is no need to comment here. It's clear that Damascus is fully complying with its obligations and is open to continuing to cooperate with the UN. We hope that all colleagues in the Council will take note of that. Against that backdrop, the situation in humanitarian supplies through cross-line supplies to Idlib is a lot less optimistic. We have to note that as we feared, euphoria from the one-time August convoy did in fact occur. Over the next 2 months, there was no further cross-line movements, and food continues to be stored in Samrad. The modalities on the UNICEF humanitarian operation require further explanation. Under what criteria is it considered a cross-line delivery? Because as we understand it, nothing was delivered cross-line. We'd also like to get some clarification as to what steps are being taken to increase efforts on projects of early reconstruction. The information in the report of the Secretary General do give some optimism, but there's no minimal real progress. For example, it's not quite clear why efforts at job creation fall under the aforementioned category. How can improving the socioeconomic situation of people, which is of course important, have an impact on the tangible situation of life in a country with a shattered infrastructure? We see connection as being very indirect, to be frank. Mr. President, the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, Mr. Grandi, following his recent visit to Syria, clearly stated the need to create all conditions for returning refugees. Now, given the global economic crisis, Syria's neighbors in the region have openly recognized limits on their possibility to continue to host Syrian refugees. Among refugees, the number is growing among those who don't want to live in tents and want to return to their homeland in order for a more stable life. Hundreds every month are returning, mostly women and children. To provide the necessary support, the Syrian government has set up reception centers in 413 towns and cities to house refugees for some 1.5 million people in the provinces of Aleppo, Damascus, and Hama. A government program is being implemented for territories liberated from insurgents. These efforts of the Syrian government, squeezed by the vice grip of Western sanctions, deserve support. However, Western colleagues with a determination that would be better used elsewhere are doing everything to distort the situation, politicizing this purely humanitarian topic, intimidating potential returnees, and disseminating fake news while doing so. And a good example was the statement by my American colleague just now. The quicker our colleagues shift to a normal, constructive vein, the better it'll be for ordinary Syrians and their neighbors in the region. At the same time, we read in reports of OCHA about the increase in extreme poverty of Idlib, which is under the control of terrorists, including among those who are working. It's no surprise that in the enclave, street protests have begun among the rapidly growing number of hungry civilians who are still being held hostage de facto by the remnants of diehard insurgents. Among the most recent examples of the absolutely slave owner-like behavior by the Idlib bandits is the refusal to release a group of 50 teenagers who decided to enroll in universities in Aleppo and in Damascus. Colleagues who are advocating for the rights of children and to protect the right to education, we hope that you will make your position known about that. At the same time, we must note the stabilization of the situation in Deraa. Over 70% of IDPs have returned to their homes, schools have reopened, humanitarian workers have resumed their regular operations. Of course, it's disconcerting to see what is going on in Al-Hola and Rubkan. We call on colleagues to exert influence on your clients. Now, we feel a similar consternation regarding the situation in the north of Syria as far as the multiple violations of international humanitarian law and the rights of IDPs in the regions of Ras Al Ain and Tel Abyad. Mr. President, in conclusion, I want to call on everyone to remember that very soon we'll have to adopt a decision on extending cross-border deliveries, and we will adopt that decision in an impartial manner, based on facts and based on the implementation of Resolution 2585. So far, there's serious questions about its implementation, and there's very little time. Pseudo successes or so-called successes that are just a sham will not be taken into account in this decision. I hope that our colleagues and the Secretariat in the UN understand this. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement.